What's up, everybody? This is Devin White, linebacker for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. You're listening to the LCC Network. Go Bucks.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Commissioner's Clubhouse on the LCC Network for our Freedom Agency episode. We are going to be covering everything involved with our off-season waiver wire period that starts this Friday on, what is that, July 1st, July 2nd? Today's the 30th. I don't know how many days are in June. But yeah, so anyways, it's July 2nd, like Jordan said. But yeah, we're gonna dive into that. I've got Jordan on the show. It's just the two of us. It's a very intimate setting that we've set for ourselves. Candlelight podcast, like we like to call it.
Yep. A true Commissioner's Clubhouse tonight.
It is. Commissioners only. Sorry, everyone. No, I'm just kidding. I think this is kind of last minute. I'm planning on, especially my part. But this is gonna be fun. I mean, we have nothing but waiver wire stuff. We don't really even have news and notes to go over. I had initially planned for us to talk about rookie draft stuff too, the results and our thoughts on it, how it went. But we wouldn't really be doing that justice if we, dabbled in that and then just talked about waiver wire stuff, because I think that deserves its own podcast episode in itself. So I'm thinking maybe next week we'll dive into that. And then week after that, waiver wire should be over, and then we can kind of recap the entire offseason heading into our regular draft. But you ready to kick it off, Jordan?
Always. It's hump day. Let's do it.
All right, let's do this sound drop.
I got this one.
All right. I wonder if anyone even got to hear that. I have no idea until this is uploaded. I have no idea if it captured it or not. But anyways, here we go. We are going to break this down by position. We're not going to do overall because that was my plan initially. But Jordan made a good point. With everyone's rosters at least semi-constructed going into this point of the season, everyone has different team needs. So just because a guy is number one doesn't necessarily mean he's going to go first overall, because if you don't need a receiver, why would you go get the best receiver in free agency if you need a quarterback, for instance, and there's talent there to get? So that's how we're going to kind of break it up going into this as I scroll over to Google Sheets really quick. And by the way, guys, I am going to share this with everyone in the league. Probably we'll even share this on Twitter, maybe. I'm not sure. But to kick it off, we're going to start with quarterbacks. We're going to go with number one, Jalen Hurts. Averaged 14.9 points per game last season in our league. It's not much, but that factors in all of the weeks where he kind of came in the fourth quarter, or maybe he was hurt and didn't finish the game, that type of deal. His ADP is 89. Fantasy Pros has him ranked number 10 at his position. His best rank, though, by all the experts, is number 4. His worst rank is 30. So obviously, you either love or hate Jalen Hurts going in to the season. I'll just keep running through these other guys, Jordan, and then we'll loop back around and talk about anyone we want. Number 2 on the list, we got Tua. Average 24.1 points per game. His ADP is 140. Fantasy Pros has him as QB 21. His best rank, however, is 12. His worst rank is 32. Sam Darnold, he is back, but not with the Jets. He's with the Panthers, actually, so that's a little out of date. But his average points per game is 23.2. ADP is 203, the lowest out of all the quarterbacks, and one of the lowest, actually, period, that we're going to talk about this evening. Fantasy Pros has him ranked as QB 25. His best rank, however, though, is QB 13. His worst is 33, and there's 32 teams in the league, so I don't know how that makes any sense if you're ranking quarterbacks as an expert. And then number 4, we got Jameis Winston. His points per game was 1.8 because he never started last year. His ADP is 162, so he's getting drafted higher than Sam Darnold, even though Fantasy Pros has him ranked as QB 26. His best rank, however, is QB 12. His worst is 37. Jordan, let's break that down a little bit. Who here? who's the guy that really pops at you that you want to talk about?
I mean, it sounds crazy, but I'll go ahead and say that I actually like all four of those quarterbacks, especially for where you're getting them. And I think if everything works out in their favors, all four of them can be on a playoff team in the clubhouse this year.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Maybe not a championship with all of them, but I could see all four of these quarterbacks being on playoff worthy teams. But I think it's hard not to just automatically have your eyes go to Jalen Hurts. I think with his rushing ability.
I
And
agree.
what do you think about that?
Yeah, no, I mean, if we're talking highest ceiling, without a doubt, probably the highest ceiling out of everyone we're going to talk about tonight is Jalen Hurts. I mean, you see it here. Someone's got him ranked as the fourth best fantasy quarterback going in 2021. Now, I love Jalen, and I'm on the Jalen train, but I don't have him as QB4. That is nuts to me. But I don't have him as QB30 either. I think that's too conservative as well. Um, and I do think, though, with that said, the safest quarterback on this list, in my opinion, is Sam Darnold. If there's a guy, he's not going to get pulled. Carolina doesn't have any depth at the QB position, really, for them to bench Sam at any point in the season. They'd pretty much have to sign someone or have to do a deep dive into their
Yeah,
depth
it
chart.
wouldn't look good.
Yeah, Sam's head over heels better than what Carolina's got at the QB position. So by default, this guy, even if he performs horribly, is going to finish probably in the top 16, in my opinion. Um, Now, whether or not he's actually like QB 13, I think that it's hard to really gauge that because we haven't seen a quarterback thrive in Carolina since probably 2017. It's been a good 4 years,
Yeah.
unfortunately, in my opinion.
I would also argue he's got the best overall plethora of weapons as well. So
Yes. Out of all these guys, hands down. Well, maybe Jameis Winston has more. But I think out of all four, Jameis is the most likely to get pulled at any point in the season. I mean, they've got nothing invested in him, and they actually do have a little bit of depth there at that position. So if he has a bad game,
yeah,
guess what? Jameis is getting pulled, regardless of what quarter it is.
yeah,
And I do think
I-
there's risk there with Tua and Jalen, though. I mean, those guys, I could see either one of them getting benched if they have enough turnovers. I mean, we saw Jalen; he was trigger happy at the end of the year. I mean, it wasn't pretty, but the fantasy points he was giving you, I mean, you can't ignore, and that's
yeah.
why so many people are high on him.
I think it would be a little harder for Tua to get pulled this year without having Fitzmagic sitting behind him.
Yeah.
But anything is possible.
And who's the backup in Philly now?
I'm going to be honest and say I do not know.
I don't either, honestly. None of these guys besides Jameis have a reliable backup that I can think of off the top of my head, which I think plays into their favor. It gives you more wiggle room if they do struggle. Less likely that they get benched for the year.
Yeah, which is always a good thing.
Yeah. For time's sake, we'll keep it rolling to running backs here. We'll kick it off with Miami's own Myles Gaskin, who averaged 26.4 fantasy points per game in our league. His ADP is 57, so he's getting drafted higher than any of the quarterbacks we talked about. Fantasy Pros has him ranked as RB23, but his best rank is RB12 and his worst is 41, which, again, blows my mind. I can't even think of 40 other running backs. I don't I don't see that as possible.
Yeah, that's basically saying some backups are better than a starter.
Exactly. No more than a couple, like a bunch.
Yeah,
But yeah, so obviously, another player you either love or hate. Chase Edmonds, maybe even more polarizing. He averaged 16.4 fantasy points per game last year. His ADP is 64. Fantasy Pros has him ranked as RB28. His best rank is 16, though, and his worst is 48. Raheem Mostert, another one, 22.1 points per game last year. His ADP is 61, so it's higher than Edmonds. And Fantasy Pros has him as RB25, so a little bit higher than Chase Edmonds. His best rank is 22, and his worst is 38. Then, of course, we got Leonard Fournette, averaged 14.5 points per game last season. His ADP was 66. Sorry, his Fantasy Pros rank is 33. best ranked 24, worst ranked 51. Damian Harris averaged 19 points per game. His ADP 89. Fantasy Pros has him as RB 29. His best rank is 22, and his worst is 43. And their last running back we'll talk about, James Conner, also in Arizona. His ADP or his points per game last year, averaged at least, is 21.8. His ADP is 81 though. Fantasy Pros is him as RB 34, best rank 23, worst rank 50. Jordan, that's a lot. This is even more polarizing, I'd argue, than the quarterback list that we have in terms of what experts think of these guys. They're either a guy who's like on the cusp of being a true RB1 in most fantasy leagues, or guys don't even have him as worth mentioning when you go through running back rankings.
Yeah, and it's I think a lot of it's due, like, everyone's gonna have their different opinions on which back gets the load. Like, we have 2 Arizona backs on our list right here, so obviously somebody's got more faith than others. New England's usually volatile with carries. San Francisco totes the ball a lot, but they seem to roll out 6 running backs a lot of times.
Yeah.
So yeah, but saying all that, that's why it clearly makes Myles Gaskin the man to me, just because I feel like he's gonna be the only back on this list that's commanding the carries of his team.
Yeah, they don't have anyone there behind him. I mean, that's why I like Myles Gaskin. Up until I did that trade to go get a running back, I was really planning on keeping Myles Gaskin. I liked him a lot. I liked his situation. I know they don't have a lot invested in him, but they literally have nothing behind him. I think that Myles Gaskin can be the guy by default, whether or not his average yards per carry, his touchdowns per game are high or not. I think just by default, he's gonna get a lot of points, unless something crazy were to happen and they signed a free agent and they started over at Gaskin. I do think. I mean, he's 100% in the top 24, in my opinion. Now, whether or not he cracks that top 12, that is hard to say. That's very hard to say because that offense is still so young, and they're still kind of molding it, I feel like, behind Tua. So you really have no idea what to expect out of Miami from a fantasy perspective or even from a football perspective in general. But I love Myles Gaskin. I would easily pick him over all of these other running backs that we've got here.
Agreed.
Do you like anyone more between Chase Edmonds and James Conner, though?
I would probably roll Chase Edmonds just for the PPR factor. But that's just me. Neither one of them has just been trustworthy, and especially Connor staying healthy. So I'd probably lean Edmonds, but I wouldn't have high hopes for either, in my opinion.
Yeah, it very recently.
Until I saw it.
Yeah, exactly. Very recently, I mean, Arizona's running back situation for fantasy players out there hasn't been great. I mean, it's hard to trust anyone they bring in because it's been more of a committee type of deal, it seems like. I mean, James Conner, we know what he did in Pittsburgh. The dude can run. And honestly, like, he's a decent pass catcher too. Like, the last 2 weeks of the season that he played, he had 10 total receptions. He had a number of 13 targets and a total of like 70 receiving yards. So I'm not even including rushing in that. So he proved that he can be a PPR back for you at times, but it just depends on what Arizona does. Obviously, they've got something in mind by getting James Conner, and they obviously don't trust Chase Edmonds to be the guy. Otherwise, why in the world would you bring James Conner in? He's with that injury history, so I don't know what to expect there. Raheem Mostert, like you said, it's a committee, but in a league where there's 24 teams and 24 teams have to start at least one running back, all of these guys are probably going to end up rostering. Whether or not they're claimed off waivers or if they're drafted later on, it's a different story. But I think do not be surprised if all 6 of those running backs are selected.
Yeah.
And we're going to move to receivers because we have we got a horde of receivers. This is, if I could compare it to something, it's like the White Walkers off Game of Thrones. There's an unlimited supply, basically. Our aren't.
We'll call them pass catchers just because
Yeah,
we have 3 tight ends sandwiched in here
we do have three
out,
tight ends.
out of the 14 that we've listed. But I was gonna
Yeah,
say as you roll through them, Pat, I would just skip like the consensus rankings and stuff just because we'll be sharing it with them anyway. So
yeah, that sounds good.
you can give them the ADP.
Yeah, first up we've got Chris Godwin. His ADP is 49, which is pretty great. He averaged 22.7 points per game. Cooper Cup is our, and this, by the way, guys, I probably should have mentioned this earlier. These are not our rankings. So I basically copied this from Fantasy Pros, their rankings, and went through available players. And the reason why I did that was because I felt like it's too late in the game at this point to be putting our rankings for free agency players. Now for the draft, I think it'll be a different story, but because it was, short period of time here to prepare for this, we
Yeah.
basically just use Fantasy Pros, and there's no bias involved in that either. So, this is a giant pool of fantasy experts out there. And if you've never heard of Fantasy Pros, you should use it. Honestly, I've paid for the premium service; definitely worth it. Um, it's good stuff. I definitely trust their stuff.
And we have their points per game from last year from our scoring league, so
Exactly, yeah. To
kind
give
of
you,
like to let you see.
yep, exactly. Number 3 here is George Kittle, actually, at tight end. He averaged 21.2 points per game. His ADP is 20. It's the highest out of everyone on this list. But again, most leagues don't do a wide receiver slash tight end starting position. It's usually wide receiver and then you have a tight end position. So that kind of explains why George Kittle might go a little bit higher than some receivers in ADPs. But regardless, he's a top 3 guy in this pool.
Yeah. In some instances, he's going to put up those stats. So.
Oh, definitely. I expect him to put over 20 points per game, even with the talent on San Fran's roster. Number 4, we have his own teammate Brandon Ayuk, averaged 22.8 points per game. Last year's ADP is 67. T. Higgins is next in Cincinnati, averaged 18.1. ADP is 68. We have OBJ here as our wide receiver 6 available. He averaged 18.6 points per game when he played. His ADP is 72. We have DJ Chark in Jacksonville after that, and his ADP is 74. He averaged 16.6 points per game though. Cortland Sutton after that averaged 16. His ADP is 82. Robbie Anderson at 9. Averaged 17.9 with an ADP of 88. Mark Andrews is next, our second tight end, with 17.4 points per game. His ADP is 52. And then we got Tyler Boyd here, a receiver, who averaged 17.9 points per game. His ADP is 79. Then Will Fuller, and this is out of date, actually does not play for Houston anymore. He's in Miami. He averaged 25.5 points per game. His ADP is 96. Deebo Samuel in San Fran, of course, averaged 15.7 points per game. That does include the games where he was hurt, and his ADP was 91. And then we have T.J. Hawkinson, who's the last on this list, averaged 14.6 points per game. His ADP was 63. Now that's a list, Jordan. That's 14 guys there. I don't necessarily expect all 14 to be rostered at the end of our free agency period, but I do imagine probably 3/4 are definitely rostered. I'd be shocked if not.
Yeah, I agree with that. I would say at least 8 or 9 of them are taken, and I mean it's not bad if you're in need of a pass catcher. It's a great time to get one at a discount value.
Mm-hmm.
So,
I mean, worst case scenario, it's your backup. You know what I mean?
yeah, yeah, exactly. And there's a few guys on the list that I feel like could play above backup.
Yeah. And honestly, like, man, I easily the top 10. Easily, I take any of those guys in the top 10. I wouldn't even think about it. Now, where I take them is a different story. Of course, Chris Godwin, me personally, I think he is the best player in this entire free agency pool at the moment. He should be the first overall pick. Now, whether or not Cameron takes him with the first pick, that's a different story because he has the same roster needs as I do, receiver and quarterback going into this. So he's probably looking at the same way that I am. It's either going to be Chris Godwin here or it's going to be Jalen Hurts. I don't know. I don't think you can debate whether or not Chris Godwin is the best receiver available in the free agency pool. I mean, some people have him as a top 12 guy, even in the top 10. Some people have him as low as 23, though. It just depends. I know a lot of people are scared by the amount of talent in Tampa Bay. And, Brady can only throw to so many guys in a game, right? So it does make sense why some people would, pump the brakes a little bit on Chris Godwin. But I do value him as a top 12 receiver.
Yeah, I think he's really good. He's going to have a good year, in my opinion. Some of the ones I like, I clearly like Cooper Kupp uh, hooking up with Matthew Stafford this year. Um, I'm sure you agree with that. But
Oh, yeah.
I like, might be of a Clemson thing, but I like T. Higgins in year two. I just feel like he's ready to take that next step, and there's going to be a lot of talk about Jamar Chase, but there's a receiver that they took first pick in the second round last year, and this guy that he's going to be stud too, and he's got the playbook down. But you got DJ Chark hooking up with Trevor Lawrence. That might be beneficial for his career.
That's very interesting to me.
Yeah. You got any thoughts on anybody else?
I'm interested to see if, someone like Mafali goes out and tries to get DJ Chark because he's got the quarterback already. I don't know if he does that, but I feel like if you're going on the Trevor Lawrence train, you might as well get probably his best weapon that he's going to have at his disposal in the passing game.
Just go ahead and try to double up on the points.
Yeah, that's kind of my thought at least. Sorry about the noise in the background. I guess people are street racing outside my apartment right now.
Welcome to Atlanta.
Welcome to Hotlanta. That's right. But honestly, Jordan, the top 3 guys on our list right here, all 3 of those guys, 100%, I would feel comfortable as my wide receiver one. 100%. I wouldn't even doubt it. I'd be happy with any of them. As once I get to Brandon Ayuk, I'm like, I could live with him being my wide receiver one, but if I did, I definitely want to have a little bit more depth. That way, week to week, I can rotate guys in and out.
Yeah, I could agree with that.
I don't know how I feel about Robbie Anderson. I love Carolina. I'm a Panther homer. I'll admit it. I think fantasy's not fun unless you are a little bit of a homer, in my opinion, unless you just don't like actual football. But I do temper my expectations for Robbie Anderson just because we don't know what to expect of Carolina's offense this year. But I do think he's going to be good. Whether or not I think he should be your wide receiver one, I'm not sure. But he should definitely be your wide receiver two.
Time will tell. I think I like him a little more in real life right now. There's just so many mouths to feed in Carolina. But if anyone does know Sam Darnold down there, it's him. So he might have the inbound track for targets early. So we'll see.
Yeah. The only guy here I know for a fact will not be rostered, I feel like, is probably TJ Hawkinson. I just feel like you're going to be able to get even more guys in the draft pool. Like, why would you bother picking up TJ?
I agree with that.
But yeah. And there's more guys out there. Just because we don't have them on our list doesn't mean they're not good. It's just we picked X amount of players overall from Fantasy Pros website based off their rankings. So, again, there's plenty of other guys that I feel comfortable drafting, but they just didn't crack, Fantasy Pros list. So
yeah, go comb the list yourself if you don't believe us.
Yeah, exactly. Next up, we're going to go through a defensive lineman. We have 10, so there's plenty here. And it's a wide variety of players. So we've got first up not Bud Dupree, but he is on the list. Bradley Chubb averaged 17.9 points per game. They didn't have an ADP. They don't have ADP for defensive players, by the way. Fantasy Pros, that is. And they didn't have him listed in their defensive lineman rankings because he's in their linebacker ratings. So Bradley Chubb, I can't really tell you what defensive lineman they have him at, but I value him as the DL1 in our free agency pool, at least in my opinion, because he has Von Miller on the other side, and it's going to take some pressure away. So next up, though, we've got. Were you going to say something?
Yeah, I'll wait. I was gonna.
Okay.
I believe Vaughn is on our list too, so it's kind of hard to put him over Vaughn for me. But
yeah, we also have Cameron Hayward here, averaged 18.3 points per game. The ageless wonder, he's over 30 years old. I think he's actually 32. He is the DL12 on their website. We got Sam Darnold next, averaged 22.2 points per game, and I feel like
Sam Hubbard.
Yeah, Sam Hubbard. I feel like
Yeah.
no one outside of IDP leagues probably knows who Sam is, honestly. But he is a guy you should be looking to roster. They have him as their DL17. They got Chris Jones on the list as well. That's right, we got defensive tackles on here. Average 16.8 points per game. Jonathan Allen next with 17.8. Grady Jarrett, and I don't really agree with their grade on him. He averaged 15.5. They have him as DL20. I would have him lower than that, in my opinion. But, to each their own. Yeah. Next up, and these are the guys I'm really interested in. We got Bud Dupree here in Tennessee now, who averaged 21.2 points per game in Pittsburgh when he was there. Again, they have him as a linebacker, so I can't really tell you what defensive line spot they have him in. I'd probably have him in the top 3, though, of this list. Next up, we got Melvin Ingram, who's currently a free agent. There's a lot of rumors circulating about where he's going to end up. He averaged 8.3 points per game, but he was hurt the majority of the year, so that's why the average is extremely low. But I would stay on the lookout for him over the next couple weeks to see whether or not he signs anywhere, because if he does, he could be someone worth rostering. Von Miller, who didn't get to play at all last year, was on injured reserve. He's coming back from a serious injury, and in my opinion, I don't know how many years left we have of Von. I hope we have a good bit because he's fun to watch. But he is a guy that I think is definitely worth rostering if he's healthy. And then last year, Chandler Jones, and Jordan, this might be your number one. He averaged 11.4 points per game of injuries last year. But traditionally, this is a man that is always a top 3 defensive end.
Yes. I really like the ability for potentially Chandler Jones to have a huge bounce back season. This is a guy that's came top 3 or 4 in sacks multiple times in his career. I think he's actually led in sacks a couple times in his career. But potential Hall of Famer in his own right. He's getting a future Hall of Famer teammate on the other side of him, and I'm interested to see what that allows him to do with seeing one-on-ones and stuff. He's still going to see double teams because he's Chandler Jones, but if both him and JJ can stay healthy, you're going to have to choose to shift attention one way or the other, and he could have a resurgent year just based off of that fact alone.
Yeah, I think Chandler Jones is definitely going to bounce back. By how much, it's hard to say. He's 31 years old now. He's got 10 years in the league. He's a league veteran, of course. It's just hard to say what we're going to get out of him. I'm looking at Fantasy Sharks projections. They're projecting 43 tackles, 12 sacks, a pick, 5 forced fumbles, and 3 fumble recoveries. I don't know. Their fantasy projections are IDP projections, are so hard to do. So
Yeah.
I would take that with a grain of salt. But I do look for Chandler Jones to easily be like a top 3 guy on this list, with him coming back, healthy and ready to go in week 1. I honestly like I said, I alluded to earlier, Sam Hubbard is a guy who I really like in Cincinnati. It's a young unit. Sam still is relatively young as well, and I think he could be a guy to make a difference, really, as someone's DL1, but he may end up as someone's DL2, which is just blows my mind because he's a borderline top 12 guy in my opinion. I really like him, of course. But Bud Dupree, I think we're going to see the true Bud Dupree here in Tennessee because you don't have a TJ Watt on the other side to pull away blockers. He's going to face more double teams now as an edge rusher there. And don't get me wrong, Tennessee's defense is legit, so he is not the only threat, but he is definitely the best pass rusher I think that they've got on that team. So expect his numbers, I feel like, to dip a little bit, but he's still going to be a guy you want in your starting lineup.
Yeah, I think his numbers will dip, like you said, but definitely startable. And I am interested to see where Melvin ends up because in the right situation, he could have a good year, but I guess that's just breaking news. We'll have to wait to see.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. I don't know with a guy his age, I would imagine he's probably looking for a ring at this point. I don't think he's trying to get paid like some veterans might. I think Melvin's probably just trying to find a spot where he can contribute, like I said, be in a position to get a ring and move on. It's just hard to say where that might be because a lot of those teams, their cap situation isn't great. Like Tampa Bay, for instance. I mean, they've already got enough pass rushers as it is, so I doubt he'd ever land there, but still.
It's tough to fit in Kansas City right now as well. So
Yeah, I was about to say Kansas City would be a perfect spot for him, especially getting to play against his old team. But I don't think they could really
yeah,
afford him unless he took a huge paid cut.
which he might. We'll see.
Yeah. So that's our defensive lineman. And this is where the list gets really short, guys. We're at linebacker here, we only have 5 players, actually. First up, and I think this is consistent across the board, C.J. Mosley is probably everyone's top guy in terms of availability, at least right now in our free agency pool. C.J. Mosley was out. He was in the COVID list last year. He opted out. He's Fantasy Pros LB22, but someone's got him as their LB10, and someone has him as their LB51. If you have him as 51, you obviously don't watch football because he's a starting middle linebacker for the Jets. Like, there's no way he lands at 51 unless he's hurt. And then next up, we have Corey Littleton in Las Vegas for the Raiders. He averaged 19.7 points per game, which is crazy to think about because at one point he was everyone's like top 5 linebacker going into 2020, and he can't even get you 20 points per game on average. So that was a huge letdown for most people. I think he went in the first round of our draft last year, if I remember right, actually.
Yeah, that was a huge letdown.
Yeah, he's at Fantasy Pros LB31. I can't blame them. Someone's got him as their LB15 and his lowest 63. Bernardo McKinney, and I think this is one of the more interesting players here, averaged 28.8 points per game. So the only one on this list who at least came close to LB1 type numbers week to week. That was in Houston, though. He's in Miami now as the middle linebacker, I believe. He is Fantasy Pros 33, but he's as high as 21 and as low as 59. Then we got Jordan Brooks, who's coming into his sophomore year in the NFL. Only averaged 13.6 as a rookie last year. But again, that was as a rookie, and he's really going to be, I feel like, in the starting lineup a lot more this year. They just lost, help me out, Jordan. I'm drawing a blank right now.
Was it KJ?
I believe so. Yeah.
KJ Wright.
Yeah, KJ Wright, yeah. He's gone. So Jordan Brooks is going to see more starting time. He's Fantasy Pros 43, but he's as high as 28 and as low as 75. And then Chris Barnes, I know almost everyone listening right now doesn't know who this is. He's the starting linebacker in Green Bay. He has replaced Christian Kirksey, who averaged over 30 points per game last year, while Chris Barnes averaged 21.4 last year for Green Bay, kind of is in a support role. He is Fantasy Pros LB 54, but he's as high as LB 15 and as low as 73. I like Chris Barnes. I pray that Chris Barnes falls to me in the second round because I would definitely take him. But I feel pretty good about most of these guys. I feel like Corey Littleton should probably be below McKinney in my opinion. But I really like the upside of Jordan Brooks and Chris Barnes in terms of those guys will be there in the second round of the waiver wire, and that'll be a great deal.
Yeah, I mean, I like CJ coming back from COVID. He's obviously the one that's going to be ingrained and like the linebacker of his group. But potentially comeback year for Corey Littleton. I think he tanked way too hard for me to take a risk on him. Just I'm weird with guys like that.
Yeah.
I think McKinney's production goes down slightly just because I liked linebacker production in Houston just because of the sheer amount of time they were on the field with the lack of defense they played. So it would allow guys to gobble up tackles and things like that. But I do agree with you, like in the potential of Jordan Brooks. I remember this from last year. I debated on taking Jordan Brooks in the rookie draft because I liked his potential, but Seattle had a nice linebacking core going on. But with opportunity and knowing the playbook, Jordan Brooks is an athletic linebacker, and that's the type of guy that Pete Carroll in Seattle likes. Just someone that'll fly around with the football, um, try to rebuild that Legion of Boom style. But and I'd have to admit, I didn't even know about Chris Barnes until tonight, and this is Chris with a Y, guys. So when you want to look him up, plan accordingly. But yeah, I feel like a nice little gem that was quite honestly brought to my attention by Patrick. So
Yeah, I like Barnes, but Jordan. I think wasn't Jordan Brooks a first round pick in last year?
yeah, he was a first or second round pick by Seattle. He went really high. It was actually shocking, like during the NFL draft
I'm looking it
that they
up right
took.
now. Actually, now I'm curious.
He was pretty high.
Let's see. His birthday is October 21st. If you're wondering, according to Wikipedia, yeah, he was the 27th pick in the first round of 2020. So
Yeah,
Seattle obviously thinks very highly of him. I would imagine you want someone like that on your roster, probably. Like especially if you're going in saying Jordan Brooks is my LB2, that's fine. That is totally fine. But you probably don't want him as your LB1, understandably because he hasn't proven himself yet. But I would be jacked up if I landed Jordan Brooks as my LB2 or my LB3 in our league at least.
yeah. In most cases, you don't take a guy in the first round to let him rot. So you're at
Definitely
least
not.
going to give him some opportunity. Kind of like a poor man Isaiah Simmons situation where he should see the field more this season in
And
year two.
And unlike a lot of linebackers that are getting drafted today, that man is thick. Let me tell you. I know it's a weird way to describe him, but he's 6'2", 240. He's a damn tank. Uh,
Yeah,
I just, yeah, Jordan Brooks. Look out for him this year. Now that we're hyping up, he's probably not going to fall to me in the second round.
yeah,
The waiver wire. Same with Chris Barnes, but I like to help other people out, and I like to feel validated too when I see other people buy into what I'm saying. So now I don't feel like the village idiot. I'm not the only one
yeah.
buying into this guy.
You believe me?
Yeah, but I mean, honestly, guys, name me a Green Bay Packer linebacker year to year who wasn't averaging over 30 points per game in our scoring system. And for those who don't know, if you're getting over 30 points per game in your linebacker, that's good. That's good news. You want that. Anything
Yeah,
below that, then you're kind of like, do I really want this guy on my roster? There hasn't been. Let me just tell you, there has not been a single linebacker in Green Bay who has averaged below 30 points per game since I think before AJ Hawk. All right,
well,
sink that
Chris
in.
Barnes was in the first round.
Yeah, Chris Barnes. Now Chris Barnes is going first overall. So it's very exciting. I feel like if you get the chance to get him because he should make a difference. I feel like. Let's go to our last category. There's only 3 guys here. This is a very sad list. There are plenty of DBs. Let me say that again. There are plenty of DBs available in our player pool as a whole. But in our off-season waiver wire, there's only 3 worth mentioning. Let me tell you. It's Taylor Rapp, Kyle Duggar, Ronnie Harrison. Taylor Rapp averaged 25.4, Kyle Duggar 19.9, Ronnie Harrison 19.5. And honestly, Jordan, like, I'm not jumping at the gun to roster Kyle Duggar, Ronnie Harrison. Taylor Rapp, yes, 100%. The other 2, I'm like, maybe. We'll see.
Yeah, I personally would probably, if I could get him with the second round, I would take my chances on Kyle Duggar. It was almost talking about the potential of Jordan Brooks just a second ago. I really loved Kyle Duggar in the real draft last year. I wanted him to be a Panther before I even knew who Jeremy Chin was, but that's neither here nor there. But I really feel like he could potentially become a true playmaker in a Belichick defense. Um, but it's almost that thing you'd probably want to see it before you trusted it. But like I said, if you could get him in the second round of the waiver draft and maybe him be your DB2 till he steps up and shows it. But potential is definitely there. And New England safeties have produced in the past. So
Oh yeah, we've definitely seen that over the years. By the way, Taylor Rapp, Fantasy Pros DB23, but someone's got him as high as DB10, but someone's got him as low as, get this, 104.
Whew. That's a hell of a difference. 10 to 104.
That's why I tell people, you gotta be careful about where you get your IDP rankings from, because there's some people that have no idea what they're talking about. I mean, you can't go from 10 to 104. That should not even be a thing, but it's a thing. That's crazy.
Yeah. 94 space gap. I don't know how that even happens.
Basically, you're saying Taylor Rapp's not starting this year. Not only is he not starting, but he's probably not even playing special teams.
Yeah.
That's wild. That's crazy. And they call Duggar. He's DB 81 on the list. And then for Ronnie Harrison, I'll look it up right now. He is... No, that's Harrison Smith. That's not the same. Ronnie Harrison's DB 33, which I feel comfortable with. Kyle Duggar, I feel like someone's dropping the ball there. He is way better than that.
Yeah, I guess they're just waiting on him to actually show the potential that he has, but yeah, we'll see. I would prefer Duggar over Harrison, but that's to each their own.
Yeah, and you look at the ratings here for Harrison. Someone's got him as high as DB22. That's probably where I'd put him, honestly. But someone's got him as low as 77. Again, you're basically saying this guy's playing kick return out there.
Yeah.
That's just crazy to me. And they called Duggar, I guess, because there's only 3 DBs that can spend a little bit more time on this. They've got him as high as 64. Gosh, that's crazy. But as low as 155. So there you go. Someone's got him on the cheerleading squad, essentially. But yeah, that's actually all the ratings we got. There's a good chance I actually probably add a few more players to this list that we may have missed over the last couple moments here as we were prepping for this podcast. But yeah, Jordan, did you have anything you want to add before we hop off?
Nope. Hope you all enjoyed us highlighting the premier players available in our waiver draft, which starts this Friday. Correct?
Yep, it's Friday, 8 p.m. First, I believe, 6 teams are on the clock. They have 24 hours to get their pick. Then it goes to the next group, 24 hours. Basically goes like that. It's meant to be like a slow roll, kind of like it's 4th of July weekend, right? We don't want to pull people away from their families on a holy American weekend as 4th of July. America, that's right. Everyone's pretty much got plans, I'm sure. So obviously get your pick in with that 24 period. If not, you get skipped. But you have 24 hours, so it's not like you need to be jumping at the bit. And let's say if you pick at the bottom of that group, my recommendation is go ahead and get your picks in early, but put a list, like a priority list. And then that way, at least, if you don't get the guy you want, it'll fall to the next guy and you'll be good. So that's my advice to everyone.
Yep, there you go.
Cool. Well, we will catch you guys next week at some point. I'm not exactly sure, but we're going to kind of dive in again into the rookie draft recap. And then the week after that, we'll come together, look at the waiver wire results, and dive into that.
Yeah. We'll tell you how poorly you guys did in the rookie draft next week.
That's right. All right, guys. We will catch you guys later. I'm going to play this little outro, Jordan, that you're not going to hear because, yeah, I guess Google Meet does not allow that.
All right.